everybody. Happy Friday. It's good to see you out there, Jackie. And hey, Angela, you're out there in the chat room. How about that? Paula, Dale, Joe, nice to see you. So, Angela, we're going to be talking about step 4 today.
Sounds good to me.
And it's from your favorite book, The 12 Alternative Steps, A Secular Guide to Recovery by Martha Cleveland and Arliss G. I read through it today, and as I was telling you, I liked it. I thought it was it was refreshingly different from what I was kind of taught when I read the big book, and I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Sounds good.
Before we get into that, though, I'd like to make a few announcements or talk about a few things, if that's okay with everybody. If it's not okay, I'm doing it anyway. Okay, I just want to let you know that just one quick announcement that the emotional sobriety webinar will be on January the 31st. And I'm going to go ahead and put the information for that in the chat room. So we still have a couple of weeks for that. I believe that I have a meeting on that because I do the behind scenes stuff. So I got a meeting this weekend for that. There you go. That's stuff for emotional sobriety webinar. And you know what they're doing is last time they had Dr. What's his name, Angela? Dr. I can't remember his name. The doctor. The doctor talked, and oh my God, I'm a mess. And now they're gonna have someone else talk. He's gonna be either Joe or Berger. Yeah, Dr. Alan Berger. Yes.
I was blanking on it too. I'm like, I love
my
that
mind
guy.
is
Why
like, I'm just like, oh, good
it's
God,
Friday.
It's Friday. It's the brain gets a lot of use during the week, and on the weekend it just needs to stop thinking, I guess, or stop working. Anyway, so that's that, and of course, oh yes. If you ever have time on your hands, you should go over to the Cleveland Free Thinkers website. I've posted this before, but man, they've got tons of these Higher Palooza recordings now. And they do that every single month. So that's always something to check out. That's always interesting to do. And then I just want to talk about a little bit about, the ICSA speaker meeting. We're doing that every month now. And that we have recordings from the last speaker meeting, and we'll be posting those this weekend on the Secular AA website. Then now, just before we get into step 4, the one thing I just want to talk about, because this is something I've been thinking about for a long time, and I've already made one change, and this has to do with AA Beyond Belief. So I've discontinued the practice of posting stories, the written stories on AA Beyond Belief, and I just kind of started that this weekend. And the reason for that is it was really difficult to do that, and also the podcast. And it was good to do that when I had a group of people that would help me with it, but even that was a lot to organize. And I just wanted to kind of simplify things and just do the podcast and not have to worry about all the written material. And I talked to the Secular AA board last weekend, I think it was, and told them that I'd like to donate to them the stories that people contributed to AA Beyond Belief over the years, because there's a lot of material there, personal stories of secular people in AA, and also a lot of group histories, and just there's a lot of good stuff there. So that will still, that will go over to them. That will go over to the Secular AA website, and that way I can just do the podcast itself. And then eventually with the podcast, I think I'm going to do a name change on that. And the reason for that is I'm still going to, I'd still like to do interviews with people in AA who are approaching the program from a secular perspective, and also other secular recovery programs. I've always been able to do that. But the name AA Beyond Belief kind of gives people the impression that this is some sort of an organization that's officially tied to AA. And I just want to make it really clear that, I'm not speaking for AA. I'm not officially, AA Beyond Belief isn't officially connected to AA or anything like that. This is just a podcast. It's a podcast and a website. And I often have to remind people that because they'll tell me that I'm not AA or the AA Beyond Belief is not AA. And I tell them, yes, you're right. It's a podcast. It's a podcast. But so just getting the name out of there, I think will help quite a bit with that. And it'll just kind of take I don't know, a weight of a responsibility off my shoulders, I guess, because with having that AA in there, kind of, I feel like I have to kind of behave a certain way, I guess. I don't know.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can understand that. So,
So,
and
yeah.
it'll leave you more time for your teachings.
Yeah. So it leaves me more time for my teachings. Yeah.
For
So
those who weren't
anyway,
here last week, yeah, somebody had written into him telling him that he wasn't AA
not
and his
AA.
teachings were wrong, and
My teachings are wrong.
and so we've just really got a kick out of that. That John is teaching us. He's our guru, apparently, and
Exactly. I am.
yeah, nobody
And
told him though.
you're really in trouble if that's the case too. So anyway, I just want to let you know I'm going to be announcing that for a little bit, so because it's going to be, I want people to know that nothing, that we're still going to do the same kind of podcast, but it's going to be with a different name. It's going to be called something else, and I don't know. So that's coming up. So with that being said, I guess we're ready to go into step 4, and I think that what we'll do is what we did previously when we were talking about step 3 is we'll just kind of read from the book. Oh, I forgot to, that's okay. We're recording on StreamYard, but let me press record over here too. It's always nice if you're going to do a podcast to actually record it. Anyway, because if you don't record it, it's kind of like ruins the whole podcast thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway. So now we are recording, and I'm going to go, what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and read from this. I'm going to do a screen share. Where is that screen share? Here it is. Oh yeah, I got to take this. Bear with me, folks. Oh, there we go. And
the anticipation. Maybe.
Did I lose it? I must have lost it.
Yeah, there's just the yellow screen there.
Here we go. There we go. There we go. Kindle. Bam. Got it. Okay. Okay. I'm having some issues with my computer right now, but anyway.
Right.
Anyway,
No
I'm gonna go ahead and start reading, and then you'll be able to see this here pretty soon. So anyway, step 4, taken from the alternative 12 steps, is search honestly and deeply within ourselves to know the exact nature of our actions, thoughts, and emotions. And the principles behind this step are self-examination, personal honesty, and self-acceptance. So this kind of bugs me that
well, I can start reading a little bit if you want to work on that.
Why don't you read it, Angela, and I might bother you
you do generally.
I'll interject. Please go ahead. I'm sorry, everybody. What I'm doing, I'm looking at my anything. It's my, I got a circle spinning around on my internet, so I hope I hope you can hear me.
Yeah. I can hear you. So, all right. Yeah. So we're looking at the alternative 12 steps, a secular guide to recovery. And it's, for me, I have an older version. So it's chapter 6, step 4 is where we're at. And step 4 helps us discover our true self. And step 5 teaches us to share it with other people. They work together to join us with the human race as who we are rather than who we pretend to be. Our life takes on a different reality as we change the way we know our own nature and the way we interact with other people. First, step 4. We want to change. We honestly want to change. We have tried and tried to make things different in our lives, but we haven't been able to find a way. Now we can let the 4th step help us. It tells us to search honestly and deeply within ourselves in order to know the exact nature of our actions, thoughts, and emotions. We try to know and understand what we do and why we do it, what we think and why we think it, what we feel and why we feel it. Otherwise, there will be no change. And in the middle of this page, they have a quote from Paul R. Scheele. It says, "If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. If you want something different, you have to do something different." We wouldn't be reaching for recovery if we didn't know that something was very wrong in our lives, if we didn't know that we needed to do something different, but we don't know what's wrong. and we don't know how to do anything differently. Step 4 gives us a chance to do something new, to struggle with ourselves in a different way. As we work with this step, we gain layer upon layer of deepening understanding about the things that make us tick. Some of those things we like and others we don't like at all. But at least once we acknowledge that what we find makes up our true nature, we have a realistic account of what needs to change and what strengths we have to work with. We discover who we have been, who we are now, and who we have the potential of becoming.
There I am. Hi, everybody. Now I got to get myself off of there. Oh, good God. We're really having problems today. Oh, good God. Okay. Is this fun or not? Okay. I just blew my anonymity there and I look terrible today. All right. So, okay. We're really having some technical difficulties here, folks. Sorry about that. So here we are and we're talking about step 4. Angela, how you doing over there? Are you there, Angela?
I'm doing okay.
Okay.
Yeah, can you hear
I
me?
apologize for the interruptions. I do hear you just fine now. Oh, good God. Okay, here we go. Angela,
Yeah.
I'll let you proceed. I'm sorry for interrupting everybody. Thanks, Anchor.
It's okay. Did we hear that first bit, or do I need to start from a different spot? Because I lost you, and so I'm not sure if everything was lost or.
You can go ahead and just pick up where you left off, I think, and it'll be fine.
Okay. All
okay,
right.
yeah, go ahead.
Sounds good. Now I'm like, I need to make sure that tape is over my camera just in case you accidentally turn mine on. So
okay,
yeah,
and you sound
we
a
are
lot better
having
now too. Now you're not staticky, so that might have been my own issues. So okay,
Okay.
this is fun. All right.
We're professionals. Just kidding. Okay. I really am putting a thing over my camera because you're scaring me.
I know. You never want to accidentally pop up there.
Okay, so now I'm on the part that's titled, I Know All Things Save Myself. The first principle that underlies step 4 is self-examination. We examine what we actually do and the consequences of our actions. We examine what we actually think and the consequences of our thoughts. We examine what we actually feel and the price we pay for our feelings. But before we can examine all these things, we need to identify them. The job of learning who we are is the first and most essential step in becoming who we are. To begin and to stick with a fourth step search takes, to begin with and to stick with a fourth step search takes great courage and commitment, as does reading out loud.
That was one of the first things I noticed that was different from the big book automatically. Fourth step search instead of an inventory, instead of a moral inventory.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. It is one of the greatest challenges of a lifetime, and it's undoubtedly one of the hardest. Our fear makes it hard to carry a spotlight into the dark, dangerous corners of our mind. It's even hard to illuminate the strong, safe places because we have learned that it's somehow perilous to feel strong or safe. It's hard because of the pain. It's hard because of the denial, and it's hard because it seems never ending. But practice makes it easier. We get better at it and more comfortable. Eventually, the fourth step and the many different ways we learn to use it become the foundation of our psychological and emotional evolution.
Okay. So yeah, so I mean, what I got from that is obviously that, the whole idea here is to find out, basically who I am, and then later on it's going to talk about denial, which I thought was kind of an interesting discussion. Did I get that right, Angela?
You did. Denial is an interesting discussion.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, no, that is one of the things with this, the way that they talk about the fourth step in this book is that, again, we've discussed before that it is much more about an emotional understanding of what goes on with it rather than just a rote do something by the book type of a thing. It
Yeah.
really asks you to look at things in a different way and to be in touch with your emotional self. And I didn't really get that when I read through from the big book on how to do step 4. There was stuff of being searching a moral inventory, but this is when they talk about the emotional side of things, it just sounds quite different to me, and much more of what I needed to become a better person and get well. So,
Yeah.
all right. So we're at what it takes to make the search.
Yep. And I do have it on the screen now too, so people can
All
see
right. No, I cannot see that on the screen.
Okay.
It's really tiny. But yes. Okay. What it takes to make the search. Someone said that when we look outward, we see all our problems, small and large, littering the landscape. And also that when we look inward, we look to the source of them all. When we look inward, we find not only the source of our problems, but the source of their solutions too. But how do we go about searching ourselves deeply and honestly to know our exact nature and find the solutions to our problems? This takes certain skills of character, skills that will serve us well for the rest of our lives.
And now we come to that interesting discussion.
Yes. Number 1, we accept reality without denial. Our roadblock to knowing ourselves is denial. Denial means so many things. It means ignoring, rationalizing, justifying, pretending, or refusing to consider the opinion of an objective observer when it isn't the same as our own. Yes,
Now
not very many people have that problem.
yeah, that is so cool. I don't know how I would have, but we'll go into this later. They talk about the fourth step as being something that the way that you experience it or do it will evolve over time. I think when I was brand new, I was so shocked at the denial of my alcoholism. I didn't really understand all the other forms of denial until later. And I guess I did learn that in part from the fourth step. So I think it's really cool that they address that head on about the different forms of denial that we have in our personalities and in our lives.
Yeah, yeah. So they go into detail of a couple of different examples. So denial is when our husband has deeply hurt our feelings and we don't let him know, but we lash out at our child for spilling milk. Denial is when we cruelly tease somebody and then say, it's all in fun. Denial is when we have a second piece of cake and tell ourselves we won't do it next time. Denial is when we unquestionably accept our son's explanation that the marijuana in his drawer belongs to a friend. And denial is when we give a physically abusive spouse a second or third or fourth chance. We each have beautifully crafted webs of denial about situations in our lives, about other people, and most deadly, about ourselves. It's the denial about ourselves that the fourth step confronts. Each of us has a fixed, obstinate idea of who we are, what kind of person we have, how we look, what our behavior is, what our motives are, how we relate to others, and how others see us. For most of us, this idea is based on past beliefs, on wishful thinking, on rationalizing and self-justification. In other words, our idea of who we are is based on denial.
Yeah,
A woman who, oh, go ahead.
No. Again, I just find this whole thing really interesting, and it wasn't at the top of my mind. Again, as I said, as I was really first kind of getting into recovery, but very, very true. And this is something that I have to still think about today. My different forms of denial today. So,
Oh, yeah.
really good stuff.
Most definitely. Okay. A woman who has an overweight adolescent always pictures herself as fat, even though she has been a normal weight for the last 15 years. A wealthy executive refuses his family an expensive ski vacation because his own father was always out of work and there was never enough money. A notable scientist worries that he will never live up to the definition of success he has set for himself. These people are all locked in denial and self-delusion in an unrealistic world. Their current reality is made up of rationalizations and justifications, not on the actuality of their lives today. Others are locked in denial too. There is the woman who always obeys the law, always follows society's rules, and describes herself as absolutely honest. But she is unable to look at her dishonesty to herself. She is jealous of her younger brother's success and feels a throb of pleasure when he is not chosen for an important position. Yet she smiles and tells people what fun it is to have a famous doctor in the family. She is never rude and never loses her temper, blaming the pain in her stomach on what she had for dinner. She cannot get past the initial lie that she is an honest person. Like so many of us, she believes that if she hides her true nature from others and hides it from herself, it doesn't exist. And it is possible to hide our exact nature from ourselves and from society forever. All it does is kill our spirit. It's hard to learn to see ourselves clearly, but self-examination is basic to a fulfilling life. If we are going to live the life we want to, we need to understand our real nature. We need to make considered and conscious choices instead of being driven by unconscious reactive needs. That's a major one.
Yeah,
Only
that,
when
that
we,
reminded me of what I learned in Smart Recovery is
yeah.
they do a lot of that. I guess that's is that sort of like cognitive behavioral therapy?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And a lot of relationship counseling and stuff is also on reactivity and
Mm-hmm.
being able to pause and check on whether you're being reactive or have time to take a breath and get into an active mode of thinking. So yeah, reactivity is huge. And it was something that I didn't really learn to identify until later in my recovery. I mean, I learned a little bit of it from doing the step, but I I still had self you know delusion and stuff in some ways. It was very hard for me to see myself as being either dishonest or I would kind of want to say not noble in some
Right.
way, but particularly with work stuff. There are some core beliefs that I've had or carried throughout my life, even in sobriety, about what work is supposed to be and what I deserve, and when I'm not getting what I think is right, and things like that. And so, yeah, this is a big one for that. So, yeah, I forgot where I was at now.
I think, are we going down till we discover our true motivations?
Yeah.
We discover
Okay.
why we do what. Another skill taught by the fourth step is to discover why we do what we do, why we think what we think, why we feel what we feel. Or did I skip ahead a little bit?
No, that's fine. I
Yeah.
think we're pretty good.
Why
You
do
want
we
me to
pick?
continue?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Why do we pick a fight with our husband when we know we've done something he disapproves of? Why do we resent the success of others? Why do we stay home and mope rather than make plans to be with a friend? Because we're in a pandemic. Why do we refuse a job promotion that involves a lot of personal challenge? Why do we take on so many obligations that we can barely handle them? Why do we feed the stray dog that cries at our door? As denial begins to clear, we find all kinds of things about ourselves. And this can be exciting. Some of the things we find we don't like. We don't like finding resentments, righteousness, rage, and fear. These things don't match the person we think we are. We don't like to think we deliberately cause fights rather than accept realistic criticism. That's a huge one for me. We don't like to think of ourselves as jealous. We don't like to think that we'd never be alone, or that we'd rather be alone because we still hurt from the rejections of childhood. We don't like to think we're afraid of a challenge because of old messages that tell us we'll never be good enough. We don't like to think we take on obligation after obligation, so we gain a false persona while we lose ourselves under all the busy importance. But there are bright spots too. We're glad we're the kind of person who takes on the responsibility of a homeless dog because he is a helpless creature who needs food and shelter. The fourth step shows us we have motivations that are assets rather than liabilities. Our honest search uncovers love, compassion, determination, commitment, and a sense of personal power. When we discover these strengths, we live differently. We choose to listen to criticisms from our husband without becoming defensive and lashing out. We realistically evaluate what he says and either change our behavior or decide his opinion doesn't match our own true needs. We're glad when a neighbor gets a raise and buys a gorgeous car. We meet freely with friends, take on new challenges, and choose only the obligations that are compatible with ourselves. We find peace as we pet our dog.
So
Yeah.
automatically right here, of they when you do the fourth step in AA, most people anyway, if you follow it by the book, the big book, you don't really take a lot of time to ever really think about assets. But my sponsor told me to, even though it didn't say it in the big book necessarily,
Mhm.
but it did tell me to, if you find yourself beating yourself up, stop and think about to look at some assets that you have as well. And that they point out that here, it's like um, you got that's one thing about the fourth step is that I think oh boy, it could be dangerous. As if you're already kind of depressed, and I was depressed anyway,
Mhm.
this could be kind of a dangerous thing if you go about it in the
Yeah.
wrong way. And it was kind of difficult for me to approach. It was actually I was sober for 4 years before I actually did this step, and when I did it, it was a very freeing experience. It was a good experience for me, but I definitely did it in the old big book way,
Mhm.
and I guess I got to the point where I was able to look at myself objectively and not really put a lot of judgment on it. So
Mhm.
that was helpful, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things when I was doing it, my sponsor kind of had to help me with some of the positive things while doing this step, and that was really helpful because one of the things she said was that I seek help. So I ask people, I ask
Hmm.
questions, and regardless of what the situation is, so in recovery and other situations, I'm willing to ask others what they think about things, and that I'm willing to have an open mind and change my mind on things, and that going through my history with the fourth step, things in my past, that was pretty evident as well. It wasn't when I was writing it out, it was when I went through the fifth step with her so that she could, look at it with me.
Hmm.
But then looking at what I'd written, yeah, that I tend to have an open mind on looking at things. There's still the denial and that stuff, self delusion, but in general, I'm able to take in new information and weigh it and change my mind on things. I'm not stuck in a certain worldview at any certain time,
Right.
which was cool. The asking for help, and that I'm reasonably honest on who I think I am at any given time. so so what I mean by that is, like, when I came in, I was very honest about being atheist, in that I there was um, no denying that straight off, and I would tell it to anybody who asked, particularly if they were trying to help me with finding a higher power and stuff, that I don't know about that. So my honesty in that, that I was atheist and I didn't know how I was going to do this, and that I was showing up to try it, was another strength that
Hmm.
that helped me to continue on to look at the stuff that I didn't do as well. So, so yeah, that's one of the things that I love about this book, is that, that it talks about that as well. So, let's see. Uh, Number 3 on their list is, we accept ourselves without judgment.
Oh.
Denial begins to crumble. Honest motivations are found. Then what? How does our search go deeper? It goes deeper when we begin to work on examining ourselves without being ashamed of what we find. What? Whoa? Huh? Yeah. No, those parts aren't in there. I'm just adding that for flavor. Okay. Most of us can't remember a time when we weren't judged by others and didn't judge ourselves. We grew up with parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, teachers, and lots of others telling us when we were good and when we were bad. We came to accept their judgments. As grown-ups, we still believe these old judgments, lecturing ourselves in much the same way our parents and all those other people lectured us in our formative years. We judge everything about ourselves, how we look, how we feel, how we act. Everything gets put on a continuum from good to bad. We lecture ourselves and judge ourselves, lecturing ourselves, and judge ourselves. So, yeah, I'll read that one again. We lecture ourselves and judge ourselves, and lecture ourselves and judge ourselves. Self-acceptance without judgment is crucial to discovering the exact nature we are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't give up self-judgment, give up telling ourselves this feeling is good or that action was bad, the fourth step, no matter how thoroughly or diligently we work on it, will be meaningless. We must accept objectively whatever the search into our true nature brings. This is the only way to come to peace with our true selves. Instead of self-judgment, our new rule becomes, as I search my deep nature, anything I find is okay. It's not good, it's not bad, it just is. Objective searching and accepting doesn't mean we justify, excuse, or condone any behavior that has caused others suffering or pain. We know there is no excuse to hurt anyone, but when we acknowledge our hurtful behavior, there's no point in mentally beating ourselves up either. Like all the good things we have done, the bad ones are simply a part of us, a part of the past. This kind of thinking allows room for a whole being to emerge.
Yeah, that's absolutely, as you were reading that, some of the comments in the chat room had to do with how dangerous it could be if you only did look at defects, especially if you had low self-esteem. And some people described it as a trap for somebody who has PTSD or trauma in their history
Oh,
and
yeah.
and things like that. And it certainly can be. I certainly struggled with it with parts of it. I when I finally did write it out, it was pretty much an all day thing. I was able to do it in one sitting finally when I finally got to it. But there were some really good comments in there.
Mhm.
Bobbert actually wrote. He said that he worked in a warehouse where they actually did inventory. So and when he did the inventory, they looked at what was good and bad. So he actually applied that to his fourth step, and that's exactly what
Nice.
they did. They do say in the big book they compare that as getting rid of the bad, keeping the good. And then another person asked me if they've ever had a sponsor. I think it was Joe, who gave their fourth step back to him and said, "Do it over again."
Mm.
That's pretty mean. I never had that, but my sponsor Roy did tell me that I didn't do the fear part right, and
Mhm.
that really bothered me. I didn't know how else to do it. He never really gave me a passing grade on that. He never said,
Wow.
okay, because I didn't know what to do. I listed my fears and I asked myself why I had them. That's what it said to do, right? Anyway, he said it wasn't right.
Yeah.
So
With yeah, with mine, again, well, we did do, a fourth and a fifth. She compiled at least my first sponsor compiled it all into kind of one big thing, so I didn't have the separate inventories. And the thing that I do usually, or that I've been doing, is when I'm working with somebody through the steps. On step 4 is kind of have them write a few of them. Try it out with the guidelines, and then come back, in a week or two, and go over just kind of what they wrote, so that they have some feedback if they're on the right track or not, because I have heard of people, coming back after spending, sometimes weeks and months on a fourth
mhm.
step, and then having the person say that's not right.
Ah,
And there's, yeah, I would have been, devastated, and
yeah.
would have really been frustrated, and pissed off. And so, yeah, so when I work with people, I usually try to go over, a couple of them, so that they have an idea. I also give them some of mine. So I read them
Uh-huh.
some of my fourth steps, so that they can see, examples of what I did and what we're going for, because, it can be a little bit um, abstract, I
Yeah.
guess. And particularly if, this is kind of your first time of really looking at yourself. Some of us get to AA, or recovery, and we've done other work with other therapists and things like that. So we have a better idea of kind of what's going on. But for some people, this is really their first time looking at themselves, and so I think it's helpful to be able to give some examples and work with a couple of ideas first, so that people don't go through that. I know somebody, it was really hard when they, when they got that of nope, and then there wasn't any other direction given, just you have to do it again. It's like, well, why would I do it any differently if I thought I was doing it right the first time?
Exactly. That's how it was with me on the fear part. I was never, I did it wrong, and that was it. Niche says that Niche reminded me of something. It said that couldn't wrap I'm sorry, Niche. She couldn't wrap her head around the my part. I sometimes wonder if it's not such a great idea to think of it as my part, because sometimes, we don't have a part, but I guess the way I like to think about it is, if I'm going to do this, is how did I react, or what did this experience do to me? Maybe,
No, I get what you're saying. Usually when I'm thinking about it or describing it, is if I'm using the same terminology, and really it depends on who I'm working with. If I'm working with somebody that is needs the full program and needs a meeting every day, sometimes two, and so is doing both traditional and secular meetings, then I work with the same language of my part. Otherwise, I can use different language, like you said. But I still frame it as a with particularly things like abuse and stuff from childhood, that no, you didn't have a part in the action, in what was done to you, things like that. I mean, you were a child. But the way that we think about it is, how is it affecting you? And so the my part is really more of either denial that whatever happened, had any effect on you, or, delusion about, about it not having an effect. And then being able to look at that as a part. So not the action or any of that, or any guilt or shame or, blame on that. It's more of the, like you said, what effect did it have? And, what have I been, either in denial or deluding myself about the experience, or what have I told myself about myself from that experience, Yeah. So for me, like I discussed before, one of my childhood experiences was being molested. And so one of the things that I told myself was that if I were overweight, then I would never have to worry about that again. And so that led to, an eating disorder. And then, trying to fix my eating disorder led to my alcoholism. And so it's an ongoing thing. And so learning that by doing the step work was really helpful in helping me to see that I needed, these tools in order to not continue, finding things to try to delude myself on, this meaning that I made up, and be able to look at that and say, that's not true. That's what I thought at the time. And, this is my truth now. And these are my choices now. And so learning about, that I can choose to look at myself and my situation from a different angle, and that's helpful.
Well, shall we move on to the next part?
Sure. Would you like to read for a while?
Sure. Should I read about Sam's story, or should I move to the next part?
Yeah, let's just well, I don't know. I mean,
we might get something from it.
Sure.
All right.
Tell us about Sam.
All right, Sam.
We know Sam.
Sam is 45 years old. He lives a quiet life, a life he has deliberately chosen for himself. He loves, is loved, and makes enough money to support his family and put some aside for retirement. Sam likes the way he lives, yet he has a constant nagging feeling that he's not doing enough with his life. He is not as financially or professionally successful as he could be if he had been more aggressive and chosen a different way to live. He could still change, but he truly doesn't want to. Sam is caught between his understanding of his true needs and an old judgment that he is somehow bad. He sees his unwillingness to pursue what society calls success as a weakness in his character. As he applies the fourth step to his situation in his life, he understands that his way of living works for him, is right for him, and conforms to his true self, which with this understanding comes peace. Yeah, that's a good place to get to. I know that I had some of that, especially after my father died, and I've talked about this a little bit. I got some good things from it, but I think a lot of what was driving me after my father died was I'm not really feeling so great about where I was. I mean, I was kind of comparing myself and what I had achieved materially up to that time to what my father had done. And I just felt like I had to go out there and make some money and, do all this stuff. And I did,
Hmm.
and I made some changes that were really positive. And I guess it's okay that maybe my motivation might not have been so great. The result turned out okay for me, I guess, in the end. But I can certainly relate to that feeling of just thinking that, what I've done, putting that judgment on myself that what I've done thus far in my life just isn't doesn't live up to where I think society thinks I should be.
Right.
And so I certainly had that issue. And I don't know. Now it's funny, you go through life and you go through different stages of what you worry about or think about. And I'm at the point now where I just am ready to retire. Just
Right.
got a few more years. I'm not looking to, make any more money or advance or any of that kind of stuff. So I'm pretty much at peace where I'm at right now. I just want to somehow make it through the next couple of years and find
I
out what
think we
kind
all do.
of find out what country I want to live in. Boy.
All
Okay.
right.
One final thought about self judgment. There's an interesting way that our reaction to other people can help us understand our own nature.
Mhm.
Okay, now I got to turn the page. When we rage at someone else's hypocrisy, when we become upset at another's laziness, overindulgence, or self destructive acts, we'd better examine what we are really agitated about. Is our anger really directed toward another person or at our own hypocrisy? Hmm. Our own laziness, our own overindulgence, our own self-destructiveness? Are we really furious at someone else for acting out the negative traits in our own nature that we deny, hate, are afraid of, or spend much time and emotional energy fighting against? Are we sending our anger outward because we don't want to send it inward? That's all interesting. These are all good questions to ask. The intensity of our outward response may be a measure of our internal judgment and an indicator of how violently we are abusing our inner self. Wow. Wow, man, that's a lot. That's some heavy stuff there, Angela.
Right.
I don't know what to think about that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think, in the rooms we hear stuff like judging people, judging our innards or people's outwards with our innards, although that sounds gross, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Looking at somebody and saying, oh, they look successful, I'm not that successful, or things like that. But this, yeah, really gets to, and I can relate particularly with the intensity of our outward response by our internal judgment, and I noticed that mostly when I got in relationship with somebody who had children, and took part in raising those kids. And as they were, I think I've shared before, entering their teen years and rebelling, and being kind of little jerks like they're supposed to,
Right.
developmentally, that's what they're supposed to be doing. That was really hard for me. And I had a lot of anger come up and frustration. Fortunately, I'd been recovery long enough to repress that in front of them, no, to pause when agitated. And so I would, I either remove myself from the situation, or, I just didn't say anything outwardly, and would then talk about it with somebody else in a separate place,
Mm-hmm.
so that I could look at it. And more often than not, what I was feeling was frustration, because either they were, behaving in a way that I wasn't allowed to. And so my anger and frustration wasn't at them, and what they were doing. It was at my own upbringing and what I wasn't able to express. And I couldn't always connect to that immediately. It got to where, I understood it better because it kept happening. And so I could identify that, okay, I'm angry. I'm unreasonably angry about, this teenager not wanting to put down their phone or something like that. And why am I getting so mad about something like that? And then, having to look at that, and I could recover from it a lot easier. And it saved my relationship with the girls, because I wasn't, saying, sharing my anger, verbally vomiting it on them.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to pause and to, work on it myself, and seeing that, yeah, that my reactions were not matching the situation, and why was that? And it was stuff inside of things that I had believed about how kids should behave, and what different roles were, and we weren't allowed to act like that, and why are these kids doing it, and all of that. So yeah, so looking at it was not easy, because usually at the time that something was happening, I felt definitely justified that these kids were being little shits, and I shouldn't have to put up with this, and blah blah blah. And yeah, and so having to look at myself and be like, no, this is you. It's not them. Was not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. Jackie thinks that's a great example. I do too. I think, I've also had, and I don't have kids of my own, but I've also had the thought, like with my nieces and nephews, as I was watching them grow up, and it's like, um, I couldn't get away with the things that these kids were doing, but that's because their parents were actually letting these kids be kids, and my parents didn't. They tried to repress any thought or that I might have that would be different or wrong or whatever. So anyway. This next part is really interesting and different because it talks about having personal power.
What?
And yeah, personal power. That the whole thing about really beating that powerlessness thing down in our throats is can be troublesome for some people. But anyway, finding and accepting our true self takes honesty and lots of courage. We are used to struggling and feeling weak and confused. Our personal strength is something we often discount. We try to control our world so we feel strong, but just underneath the surface of our immediate consciousness lie feelings of fear and weakness. This is how we feel, but the reality is that we are very, very strong. If we weren't strong, we wouldn't be trying to heal. If we weren't strong, we wouldn't be trying to find peace and serenity in our lives. If we weren't strong, we wouldn't be looking for joy. Our commitment to the 12-step program comes out of our strength. Oh, I surely do like that. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Jackie likes that too. She says, yes, the power, she says. I love the power. I have worked hard to figure all of this out and not have to intoxicate myself along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a conversation. This comes up every once in a while. That old saying that my best thinking got me here, and the whole idea is that where my thinking was so screwed up that I became an alcoholic, and now I'm here in AA. But actually, it was my best thinking that got me here. It was whatever thought that I had that said, I need to do something about my problem,
Mm-hmm.
and that was some personal power that I was exerting in my life. And there's absolutely that's something that I, to be acknowledged. And
Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, so that's kind of a different way of looking at things, I think,
Mm-hmm.
compared to the traditional kind of way of looking at the program, I guess.
Yeah.
And then of course, I say that, but everybody kind of looks at it different anyway. But our unceasing struggle comes out of our strength, our growing sense of humility, of recognizing our place in the overall scheme of life comes out of our strength. Our spiritual growth comes out of our strength. We always need to remember that embracing our own strength is the key to our healing. We switch from thinking we are weak to knowing we are strong. Instead of accepting our feelings of weakness and struggle, fear, and desperation, we can choose to acknowledge that we are strong. We can assume that we are operating from a core of strength, and our strength is where our self lives. We set our feet firmly on the earth and stretch our body toward the sky. All of this can be translated into personal power. Personal power comes from knowing when to stand strong and tall, to hold up the weight of the world around us, and when to yield, to fold into ourselves and let the world wash around us. I like that.
Yeah.
Personal power comes from knowing when to stand strong and to hold up the weight of the world around us and when to yield. And that's not always easy to do either. But the times when I do that, it's something that I should acknowledge. Each time we use step 4, we practice self-trust, and over time, self-trust grows and grows. We learn to trust our own search and trust where it leads us. We learn not to shy away from our own truths because they are who we are. We learn self-respect. We learn not to judge and abuse ourselves. In place of judgment and abuse, we put love and understanding. We treat ourselves as dearly loved friends.
Yeah. Yeah, that was something that, my sponsor would use with me and that I've, used with other people when, in a shame spiral or having difficulty with that, or if, we've done something that we do regret that we, wish we hadn't. Are confused about it is what would you say to a friend that you love, somebody that you sponsor, or somebody who's struggling, what would you say to them, or how would you look at them, or treat them? And most of the time, we would be extremely kind and loving and caring to the person, compassionate, and so sometimes we have to be reminded that that we need to do that with ourselves as well, and to treat ourselves as a dearly loved friend. I like that.
Yeah. And now, I guess we got a little more time. I like this section here. I was talking to Angela about this before we started. What I really liked about this approach to the 4th step is that it's a process that will evolve over time. So as we grow and change, the way that we will work the 4th step will grow and change. And whereas when you read the big book in the 12 and 12, it talks about doing the inventory, and then it says that some of us choose to do an annual house cleaning, but it doesn't really emphasize that this is something that will grow as you grow, that you will change the way that you look at yourself as you learn more about yourself. And as you become, a stronger person in your recovery, you're going to be taking a look at things a little bit differently. And I just found that really, really interesting. And it's a great way of looking at it, so that, a lot of times people, when I was this way for sure, when I first started working on the 4th step, I was afraid that I wasn't going to do it right. And I wanted to do it just the right way. And so I went to all these different people to ask them how they did it. And of course I got a different answer from everybody. It was really confusing to me, but that's because what it says here I think is true. Everyone's search is different, and everyone's search will grow. And I think that's important for people to know if they're just starting out with a 4th step, is just go ahead and do it, because you'll probably do this again. It might be a good idea to do this again. And the next time you do it, you might do it in a different way and look at different aspects of your life. So no one method of doing the 4th step is better than another. Each of us will discover many ways of examining our exact nature. Step 4 can be casual mental notes of self-revelation, or it can be structured, formal, and written. It can be written spontaneously in a journal, or as carefully thought out responses to a systematic 4th step guide. First-time 4th steps usually focus on problems in the present, because present negative behavior must be arrested or slowed before we go deeper into ourselves. And that's very interesting. I actually did that when I did my 4th step. The first time I did it on an existing situation that I had in my life because it was an immediate problem. And then, but I never really thought about it, but because it was an immediate problem, I had to do something. Later 4th steps are more introspective, go deeper, and often amaze us with what we find. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I had to read this one. He says, I love my siblings despite the fact that they're not perfect. They seem to love me back despite the fact that I'm not perfect. There's a similar dynamic with other people in my life. Yes.
Yeah.
It talks about some printed fourth step guides and inventories that are out there. There are AA and Al-Anon conference approved booklets and independently published guides. Fourth step weekends and step retreats are often in some metropolitan areas, and we can use any or all of these resources for help. Now, this is my favorite section, actually. The nature of our early fourth step will be different from the ones we do later. In the beginning, we usually work from the point of view of adults looking at our present lives. Our first steps also tend to be formal. We make lists of our weaknesses, writing down every negative personal characteristic we can think of. This kind of exercise is particularly helpful and important as a start. When we write down and address our negative traits, we unload painful thoughts, feelings, and fears we work so hard to keep hidden from ourselves and other people. We begin the subtle and crucial process that introduces us to the injured child inside who is really running the show. Yeah, I just love that because, it's really presenting this as a beginning. This is a beginning. You're just beginning in this process, and this process is going to change over time. Acknowledgement of his or her pain, compassion for the carrier of so much agony is the beginning of self-acceptance and self-love. It isn't only our inner child that this step shows us. The evolving step gets us in touch with our childhood pain and also introduces us to our wise self. Many of us have considered that there is a wisdom that lives deep within us, but there is. While the hurt parts of us have lived out the pain, the wise part has also utilized our experiences quietly underneath the other. This part of our self carries, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This part of ourself carries wisdom that we are
unaware of.
That our busy minds have been too frantic to discover. The wisdom is ours to use if only we will be still and listen. Recognizing both inner child and wise self, our character begins to balance. We can narrow the scope of the fourth step and become much more specific in how we apply it. It can become informal and spontaneous, our natural way to approach a problem or challenge. Instead of looking at resentment as a general negative trait, we examine why we became resentful in a specific situation with a specific other. Instead of thinking about our fear, we wonder why we feel uncomfortable around a certain relative. You know what? That kind of answers my problem that I had with Roy when I did my fear inventory. Maybe I should have, instead of thinking about my fears, I should have thought about why I felt uncomfortable in certain situations or around certain people. That would be a good way of looking at it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but I didn't know that this book existed at the time. So if I had, I could have said, "Hey, Roy, look, I'll do it this way."
Hey, Roy, this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah. So instead of lecturing ourselves about overeating, we make detailed notes of what our feelings are when we want to go to the cookie jar, and we ask our inner child and our wise self to help. We finally acknowledge that they have a lot of our answers. There is no correct way for the step to evolve. We don't move directly from a formal fourth step directed by our current self to a deeper one led by our child or wise self. We bounce back and forth. One day we make a list of our troublesome traits. 2 days later, we'll write down all of our strengths and potentials. Another time we narrowly apply the fourth step to examine a childlike trait that shows up when we are criticized by a friend. Then we may ask our wise self to help. It's all useful. It all works.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that. It's just, it's, if I did sponsor anybody and they were starting out on the fourth step, I think I would definitely recommend reading this. And I would really stress this whole idea that, go easy on yourself when you do this, because this is just a beginning. Recovery is an ongoing process that, I've been doing for ever since I've been in recovery, and probably to the day I die, that I'll be in recovery and growing and learning more about myself. So, if the first time you do a fourth step, it's just your first time, and the way that you approach it will evolve over time. So
right, yeah. And in this chapter, they go over lots of different ways that people do it. We've talked a little bit about, you said that you did it, on your, immediate specific needs and problems, and that's one way. And they say, sometimes you do the current situation, sometimes you do it on, a single relationship, and or a certain behavior, things like that. And I think it's also important when talking about the fourth step with somebody is to let them know that it's really to get perspective. It's not to to beat yourself up, or to get out, or to look at all of the horrible things you've done, so that you can see what a bad person you are and why you need to be sober. I mean, those are somewhat helpful, but really it's just to get perspective on the way you think about things, and to see if there's a different perspective or perspectives that can be more helpful to you. And so that really is what helps me when I'm thinking about it, and talking with other people about it. And it wasn't exactly explained that way to me, but that's how I learned to see it. And I kind of wish somebody would have said specifically that it's about perspective and learning to change your perspective, or seeing, all of these situations through a different lens. And that might have been easier for me, rather than you just have to write down all the shitty stuff that you think about, and all the people that you hate, and what you're afraid of, and the horrible, sexual relations you've had. That does not sound appealing. So, yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for sticking with us. I'm sorry about the weird technical problems that we had in the beginning. That kind of gave me a rough start. I was kind of worried. I thought that I was going to lose the whole entire stream, but I popped out and popped back in. It turned out okay. But it was nice to spend this Friday evening with you all again. I do enjoy this, and we'll be back
thank you
again.
for all the stuff that you wrote in the chat, and the conversation that was going on there. I didn't get to comment on what everyone was saying, but I like what I read, and particularly when people do ask questions, like was asked about I think God or higher power or something like that. I loved the responses and the openness that people had of sharing what their thoughts were on that. So thanks for helping our recovery.
Yeah, the live chat is about my favorite part, I think, of the live streams, is being able to get that interaction. And a lot of times you guys in the chat room will kind of steer the conversation another way, or you'll bring something to my mind that I wasn't thinking about. So yeah, thank you all very much.
Yes, you always pick up my Fridays.
Yes, and thanks for the compliments too, because I was worried that, oh my God, I'm really screwing up tonight. Anyway, it's okay if you screw up once in a while.
Be kind to yourself.
You're right. I don't know what that music is. Anyway, good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
This is a weird one. Good night. Have a nice weekend, everybody. Stay out of trouble. I'll be back. We'll be back again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.